Welcome to the Invite Health podcast, where our degreed healthcare professionals are excited to offer you the most important health and wellness information you need to make informed choices about your health. You can learn more about the products discussed in each of these episodes and all that Invite Health has to offer at www.invitehealth.com/podcast. First-time customers can use promo code podcast at checkout for an additional 15% off your first purchase. Let's get started.
High blood pressure, diabetes, we know that these are very common and prevalent conditions in the United States. And when we look at the top health conditions throughout the country, there's one condition that is so commonly overlooked, and I want to talk about that today because it impacts so many Americans who are suffering with this. When we look at how many Americans actually have this problem, but yet it's not talked about often, I want to give you some insight in terms of what you can be doing and how to approach this particular condition. So I am Amanda Williams, MD, MPH, and let's get right to it. Let's talk about tinnitus. Yes, tinnitus. What in the world is tinnitus? Well, when we look at hearing loss, for example, we know that there are different types of hearing loss, and this is the damage to the inner ear, which can impact the rate of conduction of sound through the ear itself. We can look at outer and middle ear conduction hearing loss. So there's conductive, mixed, and sensory neural hearing loss. But then we look at tinnitus, and this is very closely linked to hearing loss. But what this is characterized by is a persistent ringing or a buzzing sensation within the ear, and it can be triggered by a variety of different causes. And we know that the majority of cases of tinnitus are associated with one of the forms of hearing loss. So I want to talk about this today because when we look at the actual statistics on tinnitus, it is absolutely astronomically large. So through the American Tinnitus Association, they said that over 45 million Americans struggle with tinnitus, making it one of the most common health conditions in the United States. Yes, one of the most common health conditions in the United States, but yet we don't hear a lot about it. Each and every single year, the Center for Disease Control conducts a National Health and Nutritional Examination Survey. And this is a longitudinal study of health of the overall American population. What they have been able to extrapolate from that data to understand the full scope of what's actually going on with tinnitus in this country, it is really very alarming. They said that 15% of all survey respondents experienced some form of tinnitus. 67% of those reporting that they had tinnitus said that they had regular symptoms, this constant chronic buzzing or ringing within the ears every single day for at least a year. We know that 26% of those people who reported having tinnitus had constant or near constant. So sometimes it waxes and wanes, but there was a quarter of them that said it is just relentless. It never goes away. 30% of those who reported having tinnitus classified their condition as having a moderate to very big problem in their life. And just think about that just for a moment. Can you imagine just a constant humming or buzzing or ringing in your ear? Each and every single day, you go to lay down, to go to sleep, and you still have that buzzing, ringing. Of course, that's going to impact your life. It makes it very difficult to just do daily tasks when you have this constant annoyance going on. Your ability to focus, your ability to actually get a good, restful night's sleep. And we know when that starts to happen, that starts to affect all aspects of our overall health. We look at blood pressure. We look at our metabolism. We look at blood glucose levels. So when it comes to tinnitus, how does it actually occur? What's the main reason? Well, we know that generally speaking, it is brought on by environmental factors. So noise exposure, which is what is that going to create? Hearing loss. So remember, tinnitus, very, very related to hearing loss. So this seems to be the main catalyst for many people who have tinnitus. There doesn't seem to be any real genetic component to the development of tinnitus, but we do see that certain demographic groups appear to be more prone or susceptible to both acute and chronic tinnitus. We know that males generally have tinnitus more commonly than females. And they said, well, they can look at work-related reasons for this. In construction, manufacturing jobs, military, for example. But we also recognize now that more and more women are in those industries. So we're starting to see the number of women who are experiencing tinnitus start to go on the rise. We also recognize that tinnitus is more common in people over the age of 60. Now, why would that be? Well, we think about that chronic exposure to those environmental noise related inner ear injuries. So it's like this accumulative noise-induced hearing loss. And it becomes more pronounced as we get older. We also realize that tinnitus seems to be more common in whites than in any other population. So all of these different things, we can look at past military experience. We can look at loud workplace environments. We can look at musicians. There's always been that saying, you're sitting next to a loud stereo, what that can do. Certainly people who are into motorsports, that sound that does damage over time. All of these different components that we know can lead to this hearing loss, which then brings on the tinnitus. And for many people, they say, well, this is just kind of a perception in your mind. Maybe you're not actually experiencing this. And for anyone who's experienced ringing in the ears, they say, no, this isn't in my mind. I know what I'm hearing. So how can we go about supporting the health of the inner ear and those hair cells? The hair cells within the inner ear, the cochlea, these are very specialized nerve cells, and they are known as hair cells. And what their job is to do is to translate sound waves into these interpretable signals for the brain. So loud sounds over time damage those hair cells through either direct mechanical trauma, or it can be secondary to some type of metabolic damage. And when we say metabolic damage, what does that necessarily mean? That means that those cells are deprived of key nutrients, antioxidants that are needed to fend off reactive oxygen species that damage those cells. So we know 45 million Americans are dealing with this. So what are the options? What can someone do? When it comes to traditional medications, there really isn't one single drug that has been shown to actually relieve tinnitus or the emotional distress that goes along with it. But what we do know is that if we can try to regulate inflammation within the inner ear, and we can replenish those powerful antioxidants that have been wiped out over time, that this can be very promising to those who deal with this chronic condition. So what are the different nutrients that we would want to look at? We want to look at NAC. N-acetylcysteine is a naturally occurring antioxidant. And we know that NAC has been shown to protect that cochlea, the inner ear, that's been damaged due to noise. How do they know that? They actually took people in the military who were exposed to loud sounds from firing of guns in a very small enclosed space. And they found that NAC was able to protect the cochlea from that. There are other studies that have shown that NAC replenishment can help to fend off that reactive oxygen species damage that occurs because it helps to increase glutathione production. And we know that glutathione plays a role in supporting that hearing. We can look at lipoic acid, one of our endogenous antioxidants once again, and recognize that lipoic acid can help to fend off that oxidative stress that's driving that inner ear mitochondrial function. B vitamins certainly play a role. Why? Because we think about those nerve cells. So the hair cell within the ear is a nerve cell. So our B vitamins, such as methylfolate and methylcobalamin, so taking the methyl B formulation along with NAC, I would advise doing 1 capsule of NAC with each meal. So roughly around 1,800 milligrams of NAC per day. Taking 1 capsule of the methyl B. Making sure that we have magnesium on board, because we know that magnesium can very much so support the proper circulation to those nerve cells, those hair cells. It allows for those blood vessels, that blood supply, to be much better supported. And when you combine magnesium with things like NAC and your B vitamins, they all work synergistically together. We can look at things like coenzyme Q10, another endogenous antioxidant that plays a significant role. And they have found that when they give supplementation of coenzyme Q10, this can help to support hearing. Why? Once again, we look at the death of those hair cells. So the more that we can support the energy production within that cell, and we know that coenzyme Q10 plays a role into that, as well as providing antioxidant properties. So ubiquinol, zinc, these are basic things that many times you have 45 million Americans who are walking around probably with magnesium and zinc deficiencies or insufficiencies and not getting enough omega-3 fatty acids and are experiencing problems with hearing and with ringing in the ears. So all of these different things that we now know. We can look at taurine, for example. Very important amino acid. When we look at taurine, we oftentimes think about cardiovascular health. But most importantly, what we know about taurine is we're looking at that nerve cell. And we know that the damage to hearing occurs because of those nerve cells having that inability to convert those sound waves into that energy that is then perceived in our brain. So taurine helps to restore and control normal calcium flow into those cells. And they have shown that taurine can actually improve hearing ability. And you may think, well, this is all just kind of basic stuff. Yes, but think about what most Americans do. Most Americans are not following healthy diets. So they're low in omega-3s, which we know can target the inflammation that occurs within the ear. We know most Americans are not getting adequate zinc and getting adequate magnesium or coenzyme Q10. Remember, CoQ10 starts to diminish as we get older. Same thing with our natural antioxidants, that alpha lipoic acid, the glutathione. So by having just the basics, B vitamins, magnesium, zinc, kind of sound like I'm describing a multivitamin in a way, right? Think about that just for a moment. What if just taking the core multivitamin as part of your standard routine starts to create balance for you once again? I oftentimes will tell people, hey, try our Cardio HX. They'll say, hey, I have tinnitus. I have this ringing in my ear. Try Cardio HX. Why would I advise Cardio HX? Because you're getting taurine, you're getting magnesium, and that hawthorn extract helps to support that vascular flow, that blood flow. And the magnesium, which we know the magnesium and taurine have both been correlated to issues with hearing loss and tinnitus. So if you have low magnesium, low taurine, this can create problems. How do I know some of these things? Well, my own mother, for example, was dealing with tinnitus, and it was starting to become more and more problematic to the point where it was starting to disrupt her sleep. And she started using taurine. And between the combination of going on taurine, magnesium, and coenzyme Q10, she no longer has this issue anymore. And she always says, isn't that something? Just to take a couple of different supplements is all it took to rid me of this daily annoyance. So we can look at the science behind it. We know in the Journal of Nutrients, back in 2019, they looked at the effect of antioxidant supplementation in patients who have tinnitus. And they were looking at patients who had tinnitus with normal hearing, as well as patients who had tinnitus with hearing loss. Remember, hearing loss is usually pretty strongly correlated with those with tinnitus. So they did a double-blind placebo-controlled trial. And they gave these folks with tinnitus this antioxidant supplementation. And they were looking at different markers in their blood. They were looking at their total antioxidant capacity. They were looking at their superoxide dismutase levels. And then they assessed them after supplementation of the antioxidants. And they found changes in those serum levels. They found that their total antioxidant capacity level had gone up. They found that their superoxide dismutase levels went up. And interestingly enough, they were also assessing oxidized LDL levels. And that's your bad cholesterol, the low-density lipoprotein. And they found that once they started taking the antioxidants, the oxidized LDLs, which become your danger LDL levels, went down. This is a huge difference for these people because the antioxidant therapy, they said, seemed to reduce the discomfort and the tinnitus and the intensity of that tinnitus in these patients. These are people who have been dealing with this for years, sometimes every single day, all day long. So when we think about tinnitus, we know a lot of these different factors. We certainly know that the powerful flavonols that come from cocoa have been shown to make a huge impact. We have a lot of folks who will use our Cocoa HX and never tell us that they have, a problem with ringing in their ears. They're just using the Cocoa HX because they're like, hey, this is a great formulation. They start using it and then they report back and say, ever since I started using the Cocoa HX, my tinnitus has seemed to have minimized or completely gone away. So there's a lot of different nutrients that are available at Invite Health. We know that we can use magnesium, ubiquinol, CoQ10, taurine, methyl B, lipoic acid, NAC. But you can also look at things such as cocoa, the L-car with ALA. Remember the lipoic acid, alpha lipoic acid, acetyl L-carnitine? Both of those have been studied in the setting of hearing loss and in tinnitus to support the health of the cochlea and those hair cells. So if you are one of those 45 million Americans that are dealing with tinnitus, and it is making a significant, moderate to very big problem in your life, you now have more tools in your toolbox to target that tinnitus and try to mitigate that daily impact of what the tinnitus is actually doing. And to also try and stop further damage within the ear, which is most important because we want to maintain our hearing as we get older. So that is all that I have for you for today. I want to thank you so much for tuning in to the Invite Health podcast. Remember, you can find all of our episodes for free wherever you listen to podcasts or by visiting invitehealth.com/podcast. Do make sure that you subscribe and you leave us a review. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Invite Health. And we will see you next time for another episode of the Invite Health podcast.